I was honestly quite shocked when I saw how Mises interpreted gold. A giant like Mises. Just for context, I actually wrote an entire book about sunk costs and marginal costs. That book is called Economic Imagination. So please don't think Otaman has no idea what sunk costs are. Seriously. I know what sunk costs and marginal costs are. But still, why did Mises go that route? I was honestly puzzled when Mises explained gold that way. So maybe when you study basic economics, you stop relying on intuition and start training your logic. Let's say you walk into a buffet and someone rings a bell and says, "It's all on me today, eat as much as you want." Let's use that as a thought experiment. Now imagine a fancy hotel buffet where everyone pays full price to get in, say it costs about $100 per person. Then someone announces, "Don't worry, I'll cover everyone's bill today." Everything else is exactly the same. Of course, we're talking about two separate groups here. So imagine running this experiment with randomized groups. Later on, you can measure how much food each group ate. The thought experiment is which team ends up eating more. If the paying group eats more, that means people are psychologically attached to sunk costs. It's unlikely that the free group would eat more. I mean, no one's going to pig out just because it's free. But if you pay $100, you'll try to get your money's worth by. My bet is the paying group eats more, though it'd be an expensive experiment to run. If you actually carried it out, the paying group would eat more. Not a crazy difference, but still noticeably more. That shows just how much people cling to sunk costs. But according to economic theory, both groups should behave the same. That would be rational. Because the money's already gone, it's a sunk cost. I've trained myself to think that way too. So please don't doubt me on that point. You're safe to keep listening to this lecture. But is this really just about people being obsessed with sunk costs? They eat more because they feel the cost? No, not quite. It's not that I don't understand sunk costs. This is actually a monetary phenomenon, and that behaves a little differently. So what kind of mental training do we really need? While I revisited this topic myself, I was shaken after reading Mises again, so I dug deep into Austrian monetary theory. And honestly, it was pretty shocking for me too. No word has been more misused than money. Most people's ideas about money are built on metaphors. We use it figuratively. But over time, so many of those metaphors have piled up that we've ended up with a fundamentally distorted idea of what money actually is. The truth is, money can't really be used, and no one actually needs it. That probably sounds bizarre to you, right? Because in everyday life, we say things like, "I need money," or "I spent all my money." That's just normal speech, right? But do you realize those are all just metaphors? You can't literally do that with money. No one truly needs money, and no one can actually use it up. Is that starting to make sense? Imagine a billionaire who wants to own Van Gogh's sunflowers. He goes to an auction, wins the bid, and takes it home. But he doesn't even show it to anyone. He just locks it away in a private vault. Let's assume that's its only purpose. Now, wouldn't it sound strange if that billionaire said, "I really need Van Gogh's sunflowers," or "I used up Van Gogh's sunflowers"? Like, "I burned through it over summer vacation on a private island with my family." Or, "I totally consumed that Van Gogh." That would sound super weird, wouldn't it? You kind of get what they mean, but it still feels off, doesn't it? That's what money really is. So when you say, "I need money," you're not actually needing money itself. You might need a car, or want to pay for your kids' education, or maybe just buy clothes. That's the real need. When people say, "I spent all my money," it's not like they ate it like rice and pooped it out. I could start talking about consumables versus durable goods, but that might get a little confusing, so instead, imagine treating money like a TV. You frame it, hang it on the wall, stare at it. And the more you look at it, the more it fades. Not right away, of course, but after 10 years, it turns yellow. Eventually, it just loses all value. But money doesn't work like that, right? Money is an asset, like stocks, fine art, or antique ceramics. But when we talk about things like paintings or ceramics, at least they serve some decorative purpose. People say, well, at least they're useful for display. And then the argument goes sideways. The point is, we misuse the word money all the time in daily life. "I need money," or "I spent my money." Those phrases seriously distort how we imagine and understand what money really is. We start thinking of money like it's just a normal good, something you consume and use up, but that's a mistake. Money is not that kind of thing. In fact, when it comes to money, even handling it within known financial frameworks is complicated enough. But now we're facing something new. A whole new monetary phenomenon is emerging. And when you look into this phenomenon, well, it's hard to wrap your head around it. From a mainstream perspective, people are trying all sorts of ways to make sense of it. It takes imagination, but luckily thinkers like Mises and Friedman have already given us great tools to work with. Sure, Keynes understood it too, but his thinking was kind of skewed. But Mises and Friedman, though, they really reflected deeply on the essence of money. They developed some serious conceptual tools, but if you're not careful, you fall right back into the sunk cost mindset. And that's not even my metaphor. Friedman himself talked about a sunken stone. That sunken stone represents sunk costs. From a traditional economics perspective, if you think of that stone as a consumed good, something you've used like money, you're stuck in a kind of primitive emotional attachment to what's already sunk. But that's not it. Money is a ledger. You don't spend it in the way people imagine. Try approaching money from that angle instead. Start by shifting your understanding of what sunk costs really are. Mises and Friedman figured this out when they were frustrated by it. They felt their fellow economists just weren't getting it. Because at that point, you're no longer in economics, you're in philosophy. But even so, it'd be absurd to say Mises or Friedman didn't understand sunk costs. Sure, you might leave critical comments under Otamen's video, but would you really post the same under Friedman? Probably not. Honestly, we're saying the same thing. This is fundamentally a monetary phenomenon, and compared to stocks, here's the hard part. Bitcoin isn't just a secondary market. It combines both the primary and secondary market, which makes analysis really tricky. Think of it like a stock issuance market. New coins are issued every 10 minutes because issuance is continuous, with stocks. Even Samsung Electronics shares, unless they issue more shares, the money from the secondary market doesn't go to the company. So when you read Samsung's financials, it's true that the market reflects expectations of future value. But now imagine if Samsung issued new shares every 10 minutes, and those new shares were being sold on the primary market. That would completely change how people view Samsung's financials. Why would you even bother reading the financials if they're constantly minting new shares? Samsung creates value in many different ways, so this might seem confusing. So instead, imagine a company that dominates the global diamond market doing this non-stop issuance. Now you have a primary market, not just where something is issued once and passed on, but where it's constantly being sold. Now imagine looking at De Beers books and seeing that most of their spending goes into mining diamonds. People would feel pretty reassured, right? But if they weren't spending it on diamonds and instead were playing golf or blowing it on parties and marketing, wouldn't that make investors uneasy? Now another thing, someone out there clearly has a strong dislike for me. They're not thinking, well, I'm sure Otamin understands sunk costs. It's more like, who's this guy talking like he even knows what a sunk cost is? And then they drop a harsh comment and vanish. But actually, they wrote something quite funny. They imagined the mint scrapping all its advanced machinery, then hand-drawing 50,000 won bills instead. I mean, what a creative and hilarious image. If this person ever becomes a Bitcoiner, I bet they'd be a way better Bitcoin debater than me. I genuinely hope they join us. That imagination, brilliant. And that's exactly it. Because this is about money. It operates by different rules than regular products. For any other product, if a maker creates something and it costs way more than others to produce, it's just dumb business. You can't expect the market to reward you just because you overspent. It's better to make the same thing more efficiently with better machines at a lower cost. That's real value. But money works differently. Imagine the National Mint handcrafting each 50,000 won bill. Austrians would call that sound money. In other words, it's about marginal cost. It costs 50,000 won to make a 50,000 won note. There's no seniority. That's what makes it a trustworthy form of money. Wow, what a brilliant example. And that's because we're talking about money, not products. But viewing money as a commodity often leads to confusion. The individual cost of mining doesn't really matter. Take the Japanese invasions of Korea as an example. Japanese and Joseon soldiers went to war. It was literally a life or death situation. In the context of that historical moment, maybe not the absolute best. But they fought with the best available means they had at the time. Saying one side lost and the other won based on that is a fair assessment, even today. That's how you should analyze it. But if you misread it and say, one side gave it their all, and the other side could have done more but didn't, then you're entering conspiracy theory territory. That logic leads to, they lost on purpose, or someone had a sinister reason for letting it happen. Bitcoin mining is the same. Each stage over the last 12 years has reflected the best efforts at that time. Each moment represents the best available method. So if one miner spent more than others, and you think their Bitcoin should be worth more then, that's basically voodoo. That's mysticism, not economics. That's not what it means at all. It means, among all known best practices, the lowest cost becomes the reference point. That cost exists within a framework of competition. That cost is highly likely to become the price floor for Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin is money. If this were just a one-time thing, like smelting iron ore, or making a single batch of hot coil, and then shutting down the steel mill afterward, then there'd be no meaningful causal link. It'd just be a sunk cost, nothing more. Just like someone paying for your buffet meal. But this is happening again and again, and that repetition gives it real meaning. Think this through. All of you brilliant economists who know the sunk cost doctrine, but here's what most people crucially miss. Monetary phenomena, at their core, are about ledgers. And ledgers are about knowledge, about information. Mises didn't explicitly say money is information, but Hayek knew it, so did Friedman's Hayek. Mises didn't use those words, but I think he went even deeper. He reflected at a level beyond that. There's a concept called common knowledge. Mises doesn't call it that specifically, but in modern game theory, it's one of the most important ideas. Common knowledge means, I explain this in detail in my book, feel free to check it out. It means you know something and you know that the other person knows you know it. When they know that you know they know, it's recursive awareness. And that's crucial in any game of cooperation. And cost becomes a signal. Why? Because it functions as common knowledge. So if one miner spends more or less than others, it might sound like mysticism, but when we back calculate hash power, we can roughly estimate the electricity costs of that era. Today's miners, they'll use the best resources available, the most efficient tools they can access in their time and environment. So when you reverse engineer the hash power with that in mind, you end up with an estimated electricity cost. Everyone did their best with the resources they had, so you don't need insider knowledge. You can figure this out fairly easily. In other words, it's not insider info. It can become common knowledge. Of course, the general public won't know, but that's why people trust folks like me. And what I mean is, it's like blackjack. You don't have to be the one playing. You can just follow the bet. Not everyone needs to be a blackjack player, right? As long as enough people reach a critical threshold of understanding, then following the bet creates a fully competitive market model. That's why Bitcoin's cost becomes common knowledge in each era. Mises argued that this kind of common knowledge is at the core of monetary phenomena. But here's something deeper about common knowledge. It contains the historicity of cost, what most people translate as sunk cost. I've come to reinterpret, after my own intellectual conversion, as the historicity of cost. Pay attention to the history behind the cost, because in monetary phenomena, that's absolutely crucial.